Welcome to the Feudal Anime Podcast. I am your host, Jack. Unfortunately, Rick could not join us today because he was feeling under the weather, so it'll be a solo episode of yours truly. Now, Rick's choice was Another, and it was an anime that originally came out in 2012, and it is about a class 3 to be specific for 9th graders. And it's believed to be cursed because 26 years ago, 26 years from the timeline in which this takes place, which takes place in 1998, back in 1972, the original class experienced a death. And everyone was mourning over that student's death until one student got up and said, "No, she is sitting right there." And they acted as if that student was still there, even though they weren't. And when they went to take the photograph, they saw the student in the photograph. Now, it's fast forward 26 years, so that way you get a kind of a comparison where they talk about the story for that happening. And at the same time, they're trying to figure out what's actually happening and how to stop a curse. Now, what happens is every year the roster starts off with an exact number of students, but through phenomena, it changes. And so another student ends up getting added to the roster. It's as if they have always been there and they can't figure out why there's an extra student. Well, one of those students, and no one knows which student, but no one knows which of those students are actually dead. And that's the whole catch, is that they have to figure out a way what student is dead, because deaths start immediately for that class. And it's not just the people in the class, it is also the people that are outside of that class too. So their family and their friends are also affected by this as well. So it really revolves around Koichi and Mei, who are the two main protagonists. And Koichi has never been a part of the class, and he doesn't even know anything revolving around the class. And in fact, it actually starts with him in the hospital because one of his lungs had collapsed. Now, his father jokes around about it being hereditary and saying, well, since this is your second one, you won't have to experience again. Well, his dad is never there to be seen or heard from except over the phone, because his dad is actually in India and he always complains about how it's hot. Now, he drops a couple sudden hints to Koichi because Koichi doesn't remember ever being there, and the students don't ever remember having met him, but he has been there before, and you don't find out why he was there until the very end. And so as a whole, Mei Misaki is speaking with Koichi because Koichi continually tries to talk to Mei and tries to get her to talk to him, and he's trying to figure out why everyone's ignoring her. Well, the reason why people are ignoring Mei is because it's found out several years prior that one of the ways they were able to figure out or to try and kind of stay the deaths that happen throughout the year is by ignoring one of the students and treating them as if they weren't really there. Now, you find out that this isn't 100% sure thing, and that it's actually a 50-50 chance that this may or may not work. It's like half the time it does work, half the time it doesn't work. And they don't go into why when it does work it happens, or when it doesn't work the deaths happen. So they don't really specify anything about it. And the class 3 is also very unique. They don't share PE or lunch or any other periods with any other classes at all. They are solely and wholly isolated. Now, the students can go to other classes for club activities and everything like that. But as a whole, their class is completely isolated, even with the teachers knowing full well that they are isolated, and the teachers try to accommodate the rules that are specific to class 3. Now, one of the things is well, if class 3 is really that bad, why don't they change the name? Why don't they move to a different part of the building or move it out of that specific classroom? And they have done all of that. And every single time it does not work. It maintains that curse. So the students who ever end up going into that class, it is just an atmosphere full of fear and depression, because it's you're walking into a classroom where you could be very well signing your and your family's death sentence, where you will all be killed. And this actually does happen towards the end, around episode 9 of one of the students who is trying to leave with the family, and the whole family's leaving. They end up getting through an accident, getting careened off the building, off a cliff, and they all die. And then at the exact same time, another student's brother ends up getting killed from a rogue tractor having lost its brakes, or not being properly secured with brakes or chocks or anything like that, just careens down the street, and it just happens to smash into a house where one of the students' brothers were sitting, playing on his computer and dying. Now, this anime in a whole is very gory, it's very gruesome, and it is not one that is to be watched by anyone that has a weak stomach, because they do some pretty horrific deaths. One of the first deaths you actually see or experience in this series is someone is getting ready to run down the stairs, and it's wet, and they end up tripping and falling down the stairs with their umbrella, and the umbrella ends up falling down point end up while they're falling straight down into it. And they get stabbed in the neck with their umbrella, killing them in a very horrific, gruesome way. So the umbrella pops out and it's open, and that's when she stabs it. And so there's blood all over the umbrella. There's blood all over the stairways. There's blood everywhere, and they don't spare you the details too much on that. So I do suggest, if you have a weak stomach, I would watch it censored. If you don't have a weak stomach and you want to see all the beautiful details that it is encompassing in this, I would suggest you watch the uncensored versions then. It is well worth it. I guarantee it. Now, one of the things, and a couple of the students even talk about this after the first couple of deaths, because they keep telling Koichi just to ignore Mei, and they'll tell him why later, but they never go into details about it. They never talk about why they don't want him to do certain things, or why it needs to be done a certain way. And Mei even points this out to him, saying that they are the ones at fault for not explaining to you why you should have ignored me. I was chosen at random because you were coming into the class that you were not supposed to talk to me at all. Now, one of the students, they're known as the head of countermeasures. And so she is tasked with making sure that no one dies, or doing everything that she can in her powers to make sure no one dies. And even she didn't explain anything to him at all. No one explains anything. All she knows is that someone in the class is actually dead, and it won't be revealed to them until after the death, after the year is done. But even then, no one will remember who actually was the extra person, who was the extra student. So Koichi is talking to his aunt, and his aunt gave him 3 rules. And the third rule is you must obey all the class rules 100% of the time. And because no one's explaining the rules to him, he is not following the rules. So it's upsetting some people. Well, fast forward a few extra weeks, and or a couple of episodes rather, and you find out Mei actually can see the color of death. And so she knows, if she takes her eye patch off, she knows who is actually dead, despite the fact that she is not sharing this information with anyone, which is understandable. But they start blaming her and Koichi for deaths actually happening, especially the first death. Well, it is discussed that she actually, towards the end, that she actually knows who the dead person is. And she doesn't say anything to anyone. And this is one of the things that I actually have a problem with, is that she knows since day one, she's known from day one who the dead person actually was. And she doesn't explain this to anyone. She doesn't tell it to anyone. She keeps it to herself 100% of the time until the very last episode. Or not the very last episode, but the second to last episode. Now, a few episodes into the series, about episode 9, Koichi, Mei, and a couple other students end up finding a tape from a previous year, or not a previous year, but from 10 years prior, where that class somehow stopped the calamity or the curse halfway through the year, which has never been done before. It's never been stopped before, at least according to the records. Over the last 26 years, that's the only time it's ever happened. Well, the student left a audio tape, a recording for this. And so Koichi, Mei, and the other two students listen to this tape, and they find out that what happened 10 years ago with those students and how they were able to stop the curse and the calamity and everything that's happening halfway through the year is because this one student that is talking about the experiences and what happened and how it was able to stop, he is the only person that remembers the extra student. And the reason why he remembers who this extra student is because he is the one that actually killed them by accident, but he did kill them. And that is how you stop the calamity. It's because that extra person is no longer there. With this newfound information, I feel that Mei should have instantly said, I know who the extra person is, and explained why she knows who the extra person is. Despite the fact that she can see the color of death, she even before all this, she knew who the extra person was. And the reason why she knew who the extra person was is because the extra person she had actually seen die prior, about a year and a half before she became a member of Class 3. And why she didn't say anything to anyone after that point, or even Koichi, who it was his aunt who actually was the extra person, and his aunt was a teacher. And that's the craziest thing, is that this year compared to the other years, this year, instead of it being an extra student, it was an extra teacher. And that's why it was unique. This year was special, is because this year there weren't any extra students. In fact, the number of students were on point. What was extra were the teachers. Now, about halfway through, one of the teachers ends up killing themselves in front of the students with a knife, kitchen knife. He stabs himself right in the throat. But that's right there. It could have been resolved episode 1, but it ended up not. So they took 12 episodes to go through the whole process. Now, the animation, personally, could have been better. It could have been better, especially for one that was produced in 2012. It just did not feel like it was up to par. It just did not feel like it was up to what the others were in that time frame. Additionally, it left a lot of room for loopholes. And it left a lot of room for, like, if she knew this information by episode 7 or 8, why wasn't this shared after the fact? Why didn't she just go out and kill the extra teacher? No one would have remembered. No one would have known. She would have been the only one. Literally, she could have gotten away with murder. Instead, she didn't say anything to anyone, and all the students ended up going up to the mountain for the last couple of episodes. And the tape ends up getting released to a whole bunch of other students, and all the students end up going on a killing rampage. They start stabbing and killing and murdering each other and freaking setting the hotel on fire. It's just like everyone loses their mind and go on a killing rampage throughout this whole thing. And that is one of one of the things that could have been completely avoided. They did not need to actually do this at all. It could have been easily avoided. The second she had this information, she could have gone in front of everyone, stabbed her in the neck, or told Koichi, is like, you just need to kill this broad. Told him, and he would have done it because it was his aunt who was staying in the house. I mean, like his grandparents, who he was staying with at that time, knew his aunt was there, but his grandfather was just like, I'm tired of all this death. I'm tired of all this. He's just like sitting in front of the grave, in front of the picture, basically every time. And it's like, something ain't right. And you know it all the way through. Something ain't right about his aunt. It just don't feel quite right. And then it finally comes out what is really going on, and it could have been resolved before a whole bunch of other students end up losing their mind and dying. Instead, a majority of the students end up dying, and they stop the calamity halfway through the year, but like, I don't know, 90% of the students end up dying, and Koichi is still the one that ends up killing his aunt. Because she's the extra person, she's the extra individual for that class, and the twist is, instead of it being a student, it's a faculty member. But overall, it is a good anime. Not one that I would highly rate, but I feel like it was a good one. But now that I'm thinking about it more, I have to say that the writing, it started off slow. Started off decent, and then halfway through, it just seems like he started running out of ideas as to the different ways people could die, or he just got time pressed. He got compressed. He ran out of the time that he needed to be able to write everything, so he started rushing it, and it definitely feels that way, especially during the last 2 episodes. It just feels really rushed. Way more than what it should have. I could see why they wanted to have it wrap up really quick, why it only needed to be 12 episodes, but I feel like they could have just taken it that extra step, or they should have taken those extra steps to remove the plot holes in it as a whole. So on a scale of 0 to 5, I would give this a 3.25 F.A.Ps. And the reason why I give it 3.25 is because the animation wasn't great. It was good. It was passable, but it wasn't great. The story, not that fantastic, but it was still a good, solid story. And it wrapped it up. It did give it a conclusion. Granted, when you do finally get to the conclusion, it's not a great conclusion because it's something that could have been resolved fairly early on. And that's one of the biggest gripes that I have with this. That's one of the biggest problems that I actually have with this, is that they didn't close up the loopholes. They didn't explain. It's known, like, your memories can be altered, but for Mei Misaki, her memories weren't altered. As she's explaining to Koichi as to why it's his aunt, she obviously knew from day one. The second she got there, she explains it. No other class has an assistant homeroom teacher, and she is an assistant homeroom teacher. Not only that, a year and a half ago, I saw her get murdered. I mean, like, granted, the person that murders her, I mean, like, they make it look like it's Koichi, so we don't know. Maybe Koichi had his mind erased, or he had some serious psychological issues and he ended up killing his own aunt. But I don't know. I don't know why that really mattered. I mean, like, they show her looking over and seeing his aunt get murdered, Mei looking at what's happening and seeing the guy that's murdering her, and all they show is the dude like staring at her and smiling. That's great. What was the purpose of that other than her witnessing the murder and the dude seeing her witness them, right? And seeing that witness to the murder. I mean, I find that ridiculous, but I don't know. That's why I am rating it a 3.25. It's not great, but it's good. and I would recommend it to watch. I would recommend someone to watch, and it is most definitely better, a lot better than last week's anime that we watched. But if you have seen it yourself, feel free to share your thoughts with us and let us know what you thought of this anime. And if you haven't watched it, I do recommend you go ahead and give it a watch. It is rated R because of all the violence in there, and there is some profanity in it, so keep that in mind. Especially if you're watching around the kids, this is not one for them. Well, that's all the time I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this solo episode. Rick will be back next week, so rest assured he will be back with us and hopefully doing a lot better. Next week, we are going to be talking about the Magnificent Kotobuki. It is going to be a pretty interesting one. I do not know if he has seen it. I have not seen this, as all the other ones that I tend to choose. Please feel free to reach out to us with any comments or with recommendations of your own. Be much appreciated. You can reach us at the Feudal Anime Podcast at gmail.com. That is Feudal Anime Podcast at gmail.com. Or you can tweet at us at Feudal Anime Pod. Till next time.